The 2018 general elections. The issues that matter. The people that matter. This is Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan.
Bulavinaka, namaste and good afternoon to everyone. A special program yet again, another day. Another person who is calling the shots in a number of areas in our country, coming into our studio to talk about our country, to talk about what their party has to offer and what is the way forward for Fiji. We have Straight Talk today at 12:30 p.m. today due to commitments, earlier commitments of FijiFirst General Secretary, Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum. Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, on behalf of our listeners and viewers, thank you very much for accepting the invitation despite your busy schedule.
No, thank you for the invitation.
So we'll get right into it. For those who'd like to ask questions, you can call us on 3314-766 with your questions, and we'll field them to Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum. If those issues have not been addressed throughout the show, then those questions will come in. Now, first of all, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, you're on the campaign trail with the FijiFirst party, looking for another term of government come November 14th when people go to the polls. Majority of the people go to the polls. Of course, November 5th is when people go for pre-polls in a number of areas as well. When is the FijiFirst manifesto coming out?
Well, I was asked this question a couple of days ago and I said soon. Obviously, it needs to come out before the elections, and we have about approximately 2.5 weeks before the election. So it'll come out in a period where people will still have ample time to be able to read the manifesto.
By this weekend?
It'll come out soon.
2.5 weeks left, manifesto not out. Do you believe that you'll have enough time to talk about your manifesto around the country?
Vijay, as we've said that, our manifesto is in fact going to be fundamentally a continuation of the philosophy, of the principles, of the values of the FijiFirst that is already being implemented, that's already on the ground. I mean, your entire focus on infrastructure development, the empowerment of our people, the continuation of free education, and also fine-tuning many of these policies. So for example, with the TELS program, we fine-tuned that to now say people have now an option of the accelerated repayment system. So if you pay your debt within 3 to 6 years, we write off the other 50% of the debt, because we have 50% of the population is actually below the age of 27. So there are a lot of young people make a lot of young babies, so we need to ensure the sustainability. So we need to be able to access that finance quickly. So it's essentially a fine-tuning of it. So there's no sort of surprises.
No surprises, just fine-tuning?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, what do people expect from FijiFirst, knowing that, as you said, you will have continuity and consistency of policies? You've made a number of changes along the way in a phased implementation. For example, income tax threshold and duties and taxes, where we didn't see fluctuation of prices every year in, year out. And do we expect the same going forward?
Vijay, is very critical for people to understand that we need to have consistency in policies. We believe we have the fundamentals in place, the fundamental economics are in place. We need to ensure that there's consistency, because consistency actually gives confidence to people. It gives confidence to everyday Fijians, it gives confidence to business people, it gives confidence to foreign investors also. In fact, we've got a number of people who are lined up to come to invest in Fiji because of the consistency in policies. 9 years of straight growth, and it's unprecedented in Fijian history. So we need to ensure that there's consistency to be able to build a confidence. And what has actually happened is that we have now seen, of course, now with things like free education, etc., there's a renewed sort of interest in Fiji from also former Fijians wanting to come and build in Fiji, holiday home investments, etc. And also, we want to keep our young people in Fiji. We don't want them to necessarily, migrate overseas. We want them to stay here. So this is why open merit recruitment system in the civil service is important. This is why, for example, some of the YES programs, giving them grants, etc., to get into businesses. All of this is a very important. It's a holistic approach to ensuring that we maintain the sustainability. We're a small island developing state. We have a colonial history. We've never had this level of stability that Bainimarama, our leader, has actually offered, to Fiji. Never had that. that ability to be able to connect and have common and equal citizenry, equality at the same time looking after the special interests of the indigenous people, their lands, etc. All of that is sorted out now. Our main focus is economic empowerment, responsible debate, responsible giving out of facts and using of that information to build our nation.
Now, you have asked people to give, in the campaign meeting in Nandi, you have asked people to give Fiji First another 2 terms. And you've said that at least another 2 terms, and you'll be better than Australia, and will be definitely better than Australia and New Zealand. What is the party's plan going forward, knowing that you are saying give us at least 2 terms? What do people expect?
Well, it builds upon precisely what I've just said. You see, the example that I've used also in the campaign trail is, for example, if you look at a country like Australia, post-World War II, you had a Menzies government for 20 years. In that 20 years post-World War II, that's when Australia really became, commercialized financial hub. The industrialization that took place here, the Snowy Mountain, the scheme that brought about hydroelectricity completely changed the phase of, things like electricity, access to energy. And that's what we are saying, is that we have that level of consistency. Even if you look at other countries like USA, early on in the last century, they had consistency in policies. That's when people actually invest. And we need to be able to have that. And the reason why we can be better than Australia and New Zealand, and I understand some people making fun of that, the reason why I can be better than Australia and New Zealand, because the lifestyle also is very important. The quality of life in Fiji you have is, many people argue with you. We have friends and relatives who have migrated and say, yes, it's great, I can buy perhaps a big house, but I spend 2 hours every day to get to work and back. So you see, this is what we're talking about, the quality of life. And many Fijians who have actually migrated, I say there's nothing like Fiji. So we need to be able to build upon that. And what we are saying is that if you have a leader with this type of vision, a leader who's got the guts to implement and take those tough decisions, then you actually are in a very good position. And the sound economic policies in place, the ability to bring everybody into the fold. You have an inclusive government and constitution that guarantees many of the sort of fundamental so-called, insecurities. It all has been addressed. So give us another 2 terms or 3 terms, and this country will be in a completely different space altogether. It already is.
Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, will Mr. Bainimarama stay as party leader for definitely this election? He's staying for 1 or 2 other terms after this? What's the Fiji First plan?
There's never any question about that.
So he's expected to stay for another 2-3 terms as
he's the party leader.
Now, we go straight into racial and religious vilification. A lot has been said about that. What is the Fiji First concern about this? A lot has been said about it in the campaign meetings, as this continues to escalate with a number of comments made in public forums, especially social media.
See, Vijay, this is sort of gained momentum over a period of time, as you know. And as I said in one of the other interviews on one of the other media organizations, in Fiji we've had a sort of a culture in our politics of always having the boogeyman. There is some boogie person out there. There is always the enemy. We need to create the enemy. That's the old style of politics. So post independence, you had this sort of Indo-Fijian versus Ethiopia, that was whole politics was predicated on that. Political parties were structured around that. They had vote banks. Now, our leader has managed to break that. Our leader is saying that we are the only party that is actually truly, inclusive. We don't necessarily appeal to only one ethnic group or one religious group, etc. What we have seen in the social media, and I listened to a little bit of your interview with Biman yesterday, he's saying, oh yes, there's some email between me and Firoz Mohammed. But in fact, what he failed to tell you is that in Parliament, after one of the sessions, I went and took my phone to him.
You approached him?
I approached him in Parliament as he was walking, and I showed him the Viber messages. There was some group that was created in which Firoz Mohammed was on it, and in which he was basically showing photographs of me with the tikka because I'd been to a mandir. I don't find anything absolutely wrong with that at all. I've just been to a mandir. It does not necessarily mean that if tomorrow you go to a mandir, or somebody who's a Christian goes to a mandir, or somebody who's a Hindu goes to a church, that suddenly they've converted. This is part and parcel of living in an inclusive society. There's nothing wrong with it. So I showed it to him.
Professor Prasad's
I showed it to him, and I said, look, this is what this guy is doing. He said, he shook his head. He said, this is not acceptable. I said, just be careful of him. I did say this to him. I said, this guy can also turn against you if you take some action against him. And I was actually being quite generous. I was actually helping him, because I said, this person is quite a bit of a renegade. And then I also reminded him what Lenora did. Lenora Gerengere Tambua. Because you may recall there was a Tourism Fiji on one of their websites. They had translated or mistranslated one of the words for
Valenilotu.
Valenilotu. And there was somebody who was making comments on it, and somebody said, if this was something to do with Islam, these people would have already been fired. And then she commented and said, true. You see, this is what they are called the insidious type of inculcation and gendering of ethnic and religious differences. And I showed him that too. He said, I did not know that.
Did you take any action? Was there any follow-up?
No action. In fact, we also had a meeting, and they can testify. Honorable Minister Praveen Bala, Honorable Minister Mahendra Reddy, and I think Ashwin Sudhakar. We asked to have a meeting with them at morning tea time, and Pramod Chand was there, Prem Singh was there, Bhiman Prasad was there. And I said, look, we're getting a lot of feedback in particular from Lambasa about Pramod Chand making all this sort of religious comments about Muslim takeover, etc. I said, don't do it. We're in a good space now. We have everybody's being called a Fijian. Let's fight on policies. I said, you have a right to win government. We have a right to win government too. Let's try to win it fair and square. Don't get into ethnic engagement, religious engagement. And don't also try and give it any sort of fuel by keeping quiet. Because by keeping quiet, you're actually fueling it by not saying anything. And I believe that as leaders, we have the responsibility to speak out against it. Our Prime Minister, our leader has always spoken out against it. Bhiman Prasad has not spoken out against it. He goes and says, our party is 50 years old and, we have, stood against this. But has he actively made any statements about his members? I'll give you a case in point. When Ramano Tikotiko Da was accused of rape in Papua New Guinea, very quickly withdrawn as a provisional candidate. When Dr. Yunus was charged for sexual assault or rape or whatever it was, very quickly I understand NFP got him to resign. When one of the candidates has been recently charged in Ba, I understand, for some religious or racial vilification, Bhiman Prasad comes out openly and says he's innocent till proven guilty. Why didn't he have the same position with Dr. Yunus? Why didn't he have the same position with Ramano Tikotiko Da? This goes to show the double standards.
That's something to talk about on Thursday night when you will be with Bhiman Prasad here.
That's the double standards.
Now, the issue about, you talked about Muslim takeover. Some of these attacks you definitely know are personally targeted against you. How can you break that cycle knowing that there's some targets that are personally targeted for you?
Look, if it's a personal issue, you need to stay away from the personal issues. Of course, people say all sorts of things. People have targeted my wife, they've targeted my children. I don't get into that space. The fact of the matter is that people need to look at, the proof is in the eating of the pudding. The Bainimarama government and then the FijiFirst government, look at the delivery of it. Look at the output. Look at the results on the ground. That's what matters. That's what we're trying to tell the members of the public, that's ultimately what matters. As I've used the example, if now the electricity goes off over here, and assuming your backup generator does not work, if the electricity goes off, are you concerned about what ethnicity the chairman of EFL is, or the CEO, or religion, or province they come from, or which old school they went to, which school they went to? No. You say, I want the best person to run this organization. That's what matters. Do you care about the engineer who may have done a goof up? No. You don't care about the ethnicity or religion. You care about whether the person can do the job or not. That's what matters. We have delivered. People will try and do this. There's all sorts of distractions. It's happened before in the past.
So talk issues, not race, religion.
Stick to the issues. Stick to the policies.
Now, there's a lot of racist comments, even attacking religion, and a number of individuals on social media. You've brought in the laws. Parliament had enacted a law. It is yet to come into effect. Some questions have been raised about that, when they can take people to task. Do you really need to, for those people who want to take action, who want to file reports, do you really need the Online Safety Act to be in place, or they can still file complaints?
You see, online safety actually is more to do with looking after the vulnerable in our society. In particular, our children, and a lot of women are subject to these types of behavior on online. That's what it's focused towards. In particular, children and the women who are victims of this type of behavior. So it's less to do with more that type of behavior in respect of racial and religious vilification. We've precisely continuously said that. It does not in any way hinder your ability to have freedom of expression. As you know, that other countries, even countries like Germany and various other countries, even Australia and New Zealand, they've brought about both statutory provisions to be able to stop that type of behavior, but there's also a lot of common law that's developed in that respect, where people have taken individual suits against other citizens. So I think it's an area of law that's developing, but currently that's not our focus. I think, at the end of the day, we have to develop a culture, and this is why this election is so important. This election is so important because this election will decisively decide whether the Fijian public want to move forward and live in an inclusive society, a modern nation state focused on development, focused on developing the energy and positive energy of our young people, or is it going to go backwards, 2 or 3 steps backwards, with people like Rambuka, with people like Biman Prasad, and other people who actually don't have anything new to offer. They want to go back to the 1997 constitution, which actually, apart from many other things, had ethnic quota system, had also things like where the loopholes in the law, where you had lands, for example, in Momi, converted to freehold land, Itauke land.
Now we've got some questions coming in, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum. Balwan Singh from Nalawara is asking, they voted for 50 candidates in the last elections. Why is one person holding many portfolios? I believe he's asking about you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is, again, as I said in some other media organizations, I hold 4 substantive portfolios. It's interesting. Praveen Bala holds infrastructure, transport. He originally held infrastructure, transport, environment, housing, local government. They're 5. Inya Seraratu holds agriculture, rural and provincial development, maritime development, meteorological services, natural disaster management. The PM holds also a few portfolios. See, again, this is sort of being personalized. So, and even if you, as I said on one of the other programs, if you look at the ministries that are there that I have portfolios for, they're very small ministries. They're more strategic ministries than anything else. Agriculture is enormous, rural and provincial development is enormous. Natural disaster management, as you know, is quite enormous too. And we're now getting natural disasters every year. Same thing with housing, infrastructure. They're very people-focused ministries. High levels of people contact, public contact. If you look at public enterprise, it's a very actually small ministry from that perspective. All the different public enterprises have their own boards, they have their own chairpersons, they have their own CEOs, etc. They run on their own. The Ministry of Public Enterprise essentially does more to do with governance issues, whether they are running properly or not. It's not a daily interference in that. So you don't have a large ministry. Same thing with civil service. There'll be about 20, 30 people, more to do focus on training and the implementation of the civil service reforms. And communication, you have ITC, it runs completely on its own. It's more the strategic thing. So we've sort of brought in the Singaporeans to bring in e-implementation of government services. As you know, you'll be able to very soon register your babies through your phones, etc. That's what we're doing. So people need to look at that from that perspective.
Do you get enough time to handle all those portfolios?
Like I said, if they were very large people-orientated, they'll be very different. But they're not large people-orientated ministries. They're more strategic ministries than anything else. That's the point. People don't understand that. So I think, yes, if I were Minister of Agriculture and Natural Disaster Management and Meteorological Services and Rural Provincial Development, that's a lot of time requirement. That's really a lot of time, really getting out there. So people need to look at it from that perspective. And I think, again, there's been this sort of hype build up around it. And I think it's the personalization. Perhaps because I sit next to the PM, I'm not sure.
That's what I was coming to. Why are they personally targeting you? I mean, definitely you've been with the Prime Minister from 2007, and from 2014 you are, as the Attorney General sits next to the Prime Minister, you sit next to the Prime Minister. Why is the personal attack against you? Definitely you personally would have assessed and decided why this is happening.
Look, I think, again, it's the sort of whole boogeyman thing.
I think you are the boogeyman?
Well, no, I represent the boogeyman. I'm not the boogeyman per se. And I think, some people may view it from the fact that I'm an Indo-Fijian, that's why. Some people may have that sort of boogeyman of the whole Muslim thing. You see, you expect that. And see, the fact of the matter is that Fiji has been highly successful. Our GDP per capita has increased from $6,000 to $12,000 since 2007. It's doubled. Our GDP has almost doubled. It's gone up to $11 billion. Our poverty levels have reduced down to 28%. Very significant levels of changes have taken place. So people who have represent the old politics and who have not achieved this, you expect it to get even more hyped up. So you see, they cannot challenge you with facts. They do not have the figures. I mean, even yesterday when Biman was talking to you about this $5 an hour, he could not say to you emphatically, yes, I will implement it from day one. So people should not get misled by this. So when you have those kind of politicians around, when you know the government is highly successful, you have a prime minister who is now president of COP23, chair of G77 plus China, co-chair of the Oceans Conference, huge levels of accolades. So what do? They try and actually debunk the government. So obviously, we have a strong team, and so they try and target that. It's happened in the past too, and people continuously do that.
Do you believe they're winning or they're failing?
Unfortunately, I think, the reality is that they're using that type of politics. I'd rather have people contest us on policies. Talk to us about facts and figures. Are they winning or losing? Well, we'll find out on November the 14th. But I think the reality is that the Fijian voters need to realize that by focusing on a person's ethnicity or a person's religion or a person's province or what old school they went to, you're not going to achieve anything. You need to look at results. You need to look at the outcome. That's what really matters at the end of the day.
Statistics of our population is important in this. We have got 70% of the people in this country below the age of 40.
Can I have some water?
Yes, below the age of 40, 70% of our population. Do you believe that our young generation will lead the change to move away from the older generation which was stuck with ethnic-based voting?
I believe I have a lot of belief in the young people of Fiji. And in fact, in the last elections, we had a lot of young people voting for FijiFirst. In fact, the last elections, a lot of women and young people voted for us. And that's actually very interesting. And through our assessment, that's what we found. Now, we believe the young people actually have the firepower. They have the firepower. They need to be able to focus on the fundamentals. That's what we've been trying to do, trying to get them to think, have pride in their country, trying to focus on Fiji, whether it's to do with the environment, whether it's to do with the ability to contribution to our society at large, to become leaders. If you look at our lineup, we have a lot of young people in our lineup too. So we don't necessarily just say, let's have young people being empowered. We actually want to empower them through the political arena, also through the commercial arena, through studies, etc. So we believe that the young people actually will rise above that. Of course, some may fall prey to that, and there are some of the older politicians who are actually very good at it. They will appeal to very basic things like your religion. Even we've seen within the Indo-Fijians, they do the North Indian, South Indian, the Sanatan Dharma versus the Samaj, and all of that. All of that is being done. But I believe that the young people rise above that, and the young people actually are driven by facts. The young people also need to become themselves a lot more informed. The social media, of course, is a great tool, as we've continuously said.
It can be a positive and a negative.
Yeah, it's a great tool, but we must ensure that we actually are able to use it to access the right information. Every single thing that we've talked about, the economy and the statistics, it's all available. People simply need to go to it and get the statistics. Today, if you go to the www.economy.gov.fj, you'll find the entire budget book available there. Which department is spending how much? Never been made available before. All the statistics, all the presentations, everything's there. Please go read that and you'll be able to understand what the information is and what the information is all about.
That's Attorney General and FijiFirst General Secretary Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum on Straight Talk. We'll be right back after this break.
Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan continues after the break.
We're back again, and we will have a question from Salesh from Lami. Good afternoon, Salesh.
I just want to ask you on because in August what he mentioned that the price of fruits there is no duty charged to it, right? So the price of fruits will be going down. Hence, I visited most of the shops in in Suva at the moment, what the price is there is, is same as what I was buying in January, February. So where is the reduction now? Because he has mentioned that there is no duty on the fruits, what he is getting.
Sure. The duty, of course, has been zero rated. It used to be actually 32%. We brought it down to 15, brought it down to 5, zero rated. And this is precise. What the gentleman, I'm glad he raised that question actually, because you see, before what we used to do, we, for example, reduced the duty on many items. But what we found that the business houses, the traders, or the people who are the wholesale agents, did not actually reduce the prices accordingly. They didn't pass it down to the consumer. That was the objective of it. So I urge this person to actually report the matter, whichever shops he's been to. If he's seeing that the prices have not come down, to report it to the Fijian Competition and Commerce Commission. Because we, in the last budget, in the budget before the last one, we actually empowered them to, go and actually audit their books and see if they passed on the price reduction or not, or the duty reduction or not. There was a gentleman who got in touch with us about 2-3 weeks ago about some store in Nandi. And so we got him in touch with the Competition and Consumer Commerce Commission, and they actually went and dealt with the matter. So you'll find business people who do that. But overall, you'll find in many of the items where we've now reduced the duty, it has actually passed on. One of the classic examples is not a food item, but a very commonly used item, Johnson & Johnson baby products. The person who has this agency for Johnson & Johnson baby products, he's the sole agent, not just for Fiji, but for the South Pacific. We reduced it from 32% all the way to 5% to 0%. Did not pass it on. In fact, put it up. So then, of course, we made a lot of public statements, and the Commerce Commission got into that, and now it's come down.
Now, talking about overall cost of living, a lot of things have been thrown by other parties on what they will do. Of course, in 2016, you reduced VAT from 15% to 9%. A big call there, a big reduction on all items, but you also included some of the items were zero rated or VAT. Now, some of your political opponents like National Federation Party has said you've gone back on your promise that was in the manifesto, and that you have brought in VAT for those items, and you reduced VAT on that side, but you've brought in VAT here. It is not fair for the people. What's your comment?
You see, if they bothered to do these statistics are all very easily available. And this is what I find very disturbing about Biman Prasad in particular, because he rolls himself out as an economist, but he's intellectually dishonest about it. We need intellectual honesty about it. The reality is that by increasing the VAT on those items and decreasing overall VAT on everything else and bringing it all on par, 9%, we lost out a revenue of $240 million. In other words, Fijians are paying $240 million less on VAT overall, by reducing it all the way down from 15% to 9%. You need to check this, but we're probably the only country in the world, or one of the very few countries in the world, that actually has reduced VAT. Now, that $240 million savings, if you extrapolate that and divide it just on the face of it, 894,000 divided by $240 million, you look at substantial savings. You look at probably about $200 or more of that savings. So that is the level of saving that is actually taking place. Now, yes, we did say that the VAT zero-rated items will be maintained at that, and that was maintained even after elections. We are constantly looking at new ways of looking at things, constantly looking at, for example, okay, the supermarkets are actually cooking the books because there are certain items are VAT exempt, certain items are not VAT exempt. When they file the VAT returns, actually they cook the books, so we're losing revenue. Now, how can we overall reduce the cost of VAT, so to speak, cost of VAT, but also stop this, stealing that's going on?
Let's talk about that stealing, because a lot of people do not clearly understand that how that zero-rated VAT items in the past, how the supermarkets were doing that, and how after that facts are available also on the millions of dollars that the supermarkets were charged for evading those taxes.
Yeah. So first item is that, for example, when you file your VAT returns, if there's certain, so when I have a store, I have lots of items, right? Now, there's certain things that are VAT exempt, certain things that are not. So when I file my VAT returns, I'm trying to put it simply, when I file my VAT returns, I will obviously claim back VAT. If I can find a system because of the fact that I have certain items that are VAT exempt, I will show that to be able to claim back more VAT. As a result of us actually having VAT across the board, we in fact also in compliance collected more money in excess of $100 to $200 million in compliance alone, because people weren't able to cook the books. Because who's going to, FIRCA does not have the resources to go and check every store, every supermarket as to how much flour, rice they've sold. These are the sort of VAT exempt items. So you see, what has happened overall, the way they're making it sound as if that those 6 items are the only things that people live on. You don't live only on rice. You don't live only on flour. You don't live only on tea or powdered milk or cooking oil or tin fish. They are the 6 food items that are exempt. You need potatoes, onion, cooking gas, toothpaste, soap, every single thing else that you have, the VAT came down.
That's the other question, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum. It's very hard to do the balancing act when you're preparing the budget on what you'll increase and what you'll reduce, knowing that when you increase something, there's an effect on people, but government also needs money to run.
See, we have, and I think this has been the success of this, the Baini Marama-led FijiFirst, is that we have managed to find a path that is not oppressing the working classes, that is not in any way favoring big businesses. Before the whole argument was about this government comes in, they'll be anti-business and pro-supposedly poor. Or they come in and be pro-poor and be anti-business. We are not like that. We have created we have our philosophical framework. We also have an economic framework in a practical implementary perspective where everybody is able to participate in the public space on an even basis. We have given people a leg up, which they are calling freebies. So if I earn less than $30,000, government pays 50% of electricity costs. You get 90,250 litres of free water a year, free textbooks, etc., subsidized bus fares or school bus fares. You have education. All of that is what we call social wages. It no longer comes out of your pocket. So that money that's there that you get as salary saved, plus the income tax threshold has increased to $30,000. Significant. When Baini Marama government was appointed in 2007, income tax threshold was about $8,400, $8,600.
$8,500.
$8,500. So anybody that earned more than that had to pay tax. Now today, nobody pays any tax until you earn more than $30,000.
This is a big call to make from about 16,000, just over $16,000 to 30,000.
We do our calculation. We have the capacity. That's what I'm trying to tell you. We have the capacity to be able to do that, and it's on a sustainable basis. In the same way, for example, with these tertiary education loans, Sodelpa at one stage stood up and said, we'll make it all free, all university will be free. Then they realized what was happening, they realized the cost of it. NFP sort of said something similar to that. Then they came up with all sorts of permutations and combinations. I understand they're saying now, if you get more than 250 marks, then your first year is free. What about the students who are getting 220 in universities? What about them? So you're going to disenfranchise some student just because he got less than 250, it won't be free for them. You see, this is the kind of shambolic response they have. Everything that they've been doing is a response to what we have done. They have not come up with any new ideas specifically.
Now, what is being done now compared to 2007 in terms of addressing the cost of living? You've talked about that, of how you have brought taxes down, VAT has gone down, income tax threshold has been increased from 16,000 or from 8,000, around 8,500 in 2007 to now $30,000. What are the other forms of targeted assistance which you believe that has really helped a majority of the population?
Look, a lot of people don't also realize that when you connect people to the basic infrastructure of life, you significantly change their lives. The example that I've always used is that there's so many people in Fiji that weren't connected to, for example, reticulated water systems or standalone water systems and electricity, for example. A person who goes out and catches fish, if he or she does not have access to electricity, they don't have any cooling facilities. They come in the morning, they sell the fish by the roadside, $50 a bundle, if you're lucky if you get that, $50 a bundle, By midday, they have not sold the fish. They're getting worried because the fish will rot, at the end of the day. So you come along and you negotiate and try and sell it for buy it for $25. If it's not sold, they know they'll either the fish will get rotten or they'll have to eat it themselves or give it away. The moment you connect them to electricity, they're able to keep the fish. They have ice. They know that if they don't sell the fish, they can keep the fish in the freezer or in the cooler. You drive the next day, they don't sell it for $50. You drive the next day, they throw fresh water on it, they say fresh fish for sale, $50. You suddenly improve their income levels. It's that accessibility, the connectivity that actually helps. Even things like mobile phone connectivity. Today, if you don't have a mobile phone, there must be something wrong with you. That was so different only in 2008, 2009. People don't realize. A lot of the young people don't realize that. 99-cent cost for a unit call, in 2007, 2008. Today's 23, 24 cents a unit call. So you see, the fact of the matter is things have significantly changed. So it's not about just simply giving those kind of assistance, electricity, bus fares, subsidized electricity, water, free education, access to universities. The face of this country is going to change significantly within 3 to 4 years' time. Why? Because you have a significant number of young people who will have some form of qualification. Not everybody wants to go to university or, wants to go to university to do a particular course. So when they go to technical colleges, we even pay for that. We've set up 13 technical colleges throughout Fiji. Now they get some form of qualification, some form of certification that gives them opportunity both in Fiji but also offshore too. Completely change that. So our ability to contribute and to be able to source human resources within our country is significantly increased. As you know, in the budget also we've said teachers now will fund scholarships for them. If you have a diploma, you get a degree. From a degree, you can get a master's. If you have a master's, you can get a PhD. Nobody's ever done this in this systematic manner. And of course, there are opportunities to increase that even further.
FijiFirst General Secretary Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum on Straight Talk. We've got a question from Ashnita from Suva. Good afternoon, Ashnita.
How come AG is the Minister for Elections when his own party is contesting in the current election? Isn't that unfair?
Okay, this lady obviously does not understand that I'll give you a clear example. 2006, Ngarase was the minister responsible for elections.
Yes.
How come they did not question that? But as Minister for Elections, as you know, does not mean I run the elections office. Anybody who understands the electoral process, if they just simply read the law, it's the Electoral Commission and the Supervisor of Elections of the Fijian Elections Office that runs the elections. I don't go and sit in the elections office. We simply are the ones. You have to have some minister responsible for all of the functions. In the same way, for example, you have the minister responsible for Itauke Affairs, right? So you have the Itauke Affairs Board. They have their own board. You have the minister responsible for hospital. So they have hospital board. They do their own thing. You have minister responsible for Rotuma or Rambi. Doesn't mean the Honorable Prime Minister goes and runs the council for them. So, you see, this is unfortunately the kind of misinformation being spread. And I think, again, you see, these are the political opposition, political parties. You see significantly right from 2014, even post-2014, they kept on saying, there's something untoward that has happened. To date, nobody's provided a single shred of evidence about anything untoward happening. We have multinational observers. We have an independent electoral commission. We have the supervised elections. They do their own thing. So again, it's not sort of worth that level of time being spent on that.
Now, going to another issue that is important is health. We would like to ask you about some figures. A lot is being said by some political parties. Some claims have been made. You would have heard one of the NFP candidates even personally attacking the current health minister in one of the campaign meetings. But we stick to facts. Of course, in 2006, we had a number of issues with the health system, and the question is whether we are on an upward trend as far as progress is concerned, and what are the challenges still in place. What's the doctor to patient ratio in Fiji at the moment? Are we trying to better that? What's the nurse to ratio at the moment for the hospitals in Fiji? Can you shed some light on it? Do you have any statistics on it?
Actually, in fact, I brought some because I know this. They've been sort of saying quite a few things about that. And if you look at the number of doctors that were in 2006, there were 368 doctors in Fiji within the public health system. And today we have now 876 in 2018. Number of nurses have increased from 1,790 in 2006 to 3,533 nurses in 2018. Of course, the number of health facilities have also increased. Our annual budget this year is $335 million for the health sector. It was $144.9 million in 2006. Now, the other point, of course, I can give you other statistics in terms of general workers. We've increased that also. Hospital beds have increased, not by that much, but there's a slight increase from 1,714 to 1,740. But the number of doctors have increased significantly, almost.
And you continue to increase the number of doctors.
Absolutely. And we also, for example, we do things like now, if you're a doctor within the public health system, if you want to do postgraduate studies at FNU, we actually pay for you to do it.
The other issue is salaries that you've addressed.
We've 2 years ago, we gave doctors an 80% pay rise, and there's another pay rise that we've just recently got. I forget the exact percentage for that, but again, in some instances, a 100% pay rise.
Has that resulted in some of our good doctors staying back?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the whole idea. You see, we've had many good doctors. A couple of them now who actually left the system in New Zealand. They come back and do some charity work. We need to maintain our young people in Fiji. There has never, and I've said this a number of times, there's not a single Fijian doctor in Fiji that can carry out open heart surgery. God forbid if any one of us sitting in this room has a heart attack now and you actually survive it. If you need open heart surgery, there's not a single Fijian doctor that can do that, based in Fiji. So we need to build a capacity. We have now Dr. Birabo, who now does neurological surgeries. He's a neurosurgeon. He did it in Lambasa. He's now doing it here in Suva too. We're building the capacity. If you look at the operating theatre at CWM, we've had so many people who've come in. We're visiting teams that come from overseas and say, this could be a operating surgery anywhere in the world. It could be in Washington, could be in Sydney. Of course, there are many aspects that need to be improved. And we have, for example, I've got a whole list of places where we build nursing stations. We need to be able to get more engaged in primary health care. We've got primary health care workers who get $20 a month. Now they're getting $200 a month. We're building, a hospital up in Nanonga, Navosa. They'll be able to do surgeries there, x-rays, etc. But we also have this public-private partnership where we have said that we want a internationally certified hospital to come and partner with FNPF, take the Lautoka and Ba Hospital on a concession, but there are certain conditions attached to that. And though one of those conditions is that they need to provide 24/7 open heart surgery. A lot of people don't realize this. A lot of young people actually suffer from cardiovascular problems nowadays, perhaps to do with lifestyle, etc. This is why NCDs is a big issue. But to provide that, build operating surgeries, theatres, where you have viewing areas, so our doctors can actually view surgeries and procedures being done so they can learn a lot quicker, in particular the sophisticated ones. So a lot of impetus has been put in that space. And in fact, there's a lot of, for example, locums now being brought in from the private sector to, run the services in peak periods, etc. We have now engaged, overseas architects in this new maternity hospital that's going to be built at CWM. The $240 million maternity hospital, I think that's the amount we're going to spend on that. Now, they are quite significant changes. They'll bring about a number of changes.
Compared to women lying on the floor because not enough beds were...
Exactly, but even very basic things like the way they built hospitals before, if you look at the corridor structure, you could not even turn the beds around. You need to get people from overseas who will actually design hospitals, so you have, basic fundamentals in place, where you can actually turn the beds around, where two beds can pass each other. When you have a bathroom, you don't have a wooden bench, so the wood actually rots. That's what we have to deal with. So a lot of legacy issues that we have to deal with. So I think, it's being addressed significantly. And I think this PPP will bring about a significant amount of change. But a lot of people don't realize this. Once you have this PPP in place, and we have
public-private partnership for those who don't know PPP.
Public-private partnership. And we bring about, for example, full medical tertiary care facilities available. A lot of opportunities for creation of new jobs. For example, you have retirement villages set up. We had so many Japanese companies wanting to set up retirement villages. They have a vastly, skewed aged population. They don't need to come to retirement villages, nice warm places. Fiji's got a fantastic reputation. The only thing that was stopping them was the fact that we didn't have full tertiary care available. aging population in Australia. Our people are very good at looking after elderly people and also children. A lot of people go to San Francisco and California to actually provide aged care, some of them legally, some of them illegally. They can have jobs actually over here for them. So it did create a whole new industry. In particular, you can get medical tourism. So, we have thought about these issues. Obviously, our primary objective is to make sure Fijians get access to that healthcare facilities, but also there's an opportunity to build upon that, to build a sort of secondary industry related to the medical facilities.
You're saying that a lot has been done as far as staffing is concerned, also facilities. People sometimes question about the hygiene standards in the hospitals, that the hospitals could be much cleaner. How much work is being done for that?
It's interesting you asked the question because we were just recently, the cleaning for CWM Hospital has been outsourced to a professional company. And I went there, I think probably about 4 to 5, 6 weeks ago, where we had the Ronald McDonald House, and they launched that facility they've got in the children's division. And so many people are saying they've never seen the hospital so clean because it's been outsourced. And they brought in a professional cleaning company. They've got people there on call 24/7. So, again, we're looking at new ways, for example, providing cleaning services. Before it was people who were engaged by the ministry themselves. They got a salary irrespective whether they did their job or not.
Same old.
Same old. So, we're thinking outside the box. If you go to CWM, actually, you'll see there's a lot more cleaner. So, obviously, we're looking at more outsourcing, but we have to make sure that we select the right people. And before, in some of the ministries, of course, I'm not saying there's been no issues whatsoever. Of course, there are a lot of issues. But the fact is that reality is a lot better than what it was. Before, for example, you had the ministry assessing, we should get this person because of the technical expertise. We need to ensure that we have a lot more independent assessments because there used to be corruption before too. We found, for example, that some of the people who used to supply nurses uniforms, what they would submit in the tender and say this is maybe polyester, cotton fabric, and that is the fabric they selected. The fabric that actually came when they actually did supply the uniform was something completely different, very cheap. So the uniforms would fade really quickly, so the whole look was not very good too. We've also had issues of pilfering. You buy new sheets, you buy new cutlery, etc. It goes on a walkabout. Who does the walking for the spoons and the cutleries? Sometimes staff, sometimes the patients who come there too. So, again, we need to build in systems. We need to have a new cultural change in respect of how we view public facilities and indeed public assets.
Now, we move on to another issue that is important for thousands of people in this country, and that is education. You are the Minister for Education. Of course, we've also seen a number of changes in the education ministry. First of all, the reforms, where you have said that now head teachers and principals are earning as high as $100,000 a year in large schools. Now, there's also been concerns raised about, teachers are now on contracts, how can they survive? And unions have been raising that issue as well. You have talked about performance of teachers and how the education ministry in the past few years was holding back the reforms to ensure the people got the best out of it. Now, first you made education free school fees. Now the next step is to ensure that we have good quality education. How much work is going into that?
I think the reforms had a number of aspects to it. One, of course, is, for example, if you're taking from the HR perspective, one is, of course, the salaries of the teachers and those people who are the administrators. Then you have to look at the structure. That's another reform. The structure of the ministry itself. Do you still go with the same structure? It's very hierarchical. It's very district divisional driven. Very colonial in the way it is. So you had, like I've said this publicly before, you have, you go to certain districts and the district education officer or the subdivisional education officer is basically the kingpin. The teachers actually run after him or her because he or she will decide whether they get a transfer or not, whether they'll get a promotion or not, because they make the recommendation. The culture is very different. In fact, the divisional education officers should be running after the teachers because they are their clients. This is what I've been continuously saying. Our main objective for the administrators, their clients are the teachers. We need to look after the teachers, not the education officers being, patronized by the teachers. It should be the other way around, because you get good teachers, you look after your teachers, they'll teach well. Because ultimately, who's the client? The client is all the students. That's our client. From government perspective, over 200,000 students are our clients. We want them to get a good quality education. They'll get good quality education, amongst other things, if the teachers feel satisfied, if the teachers feel happy, if the teachers don't have to, butter up the divisional education officers. The structure needs to change. The other issue, of course, is within the structure also, we need to look at things like, who are the people who actually hold these positions? We have an asset management unit within the Ministry of Education. It's essentially run by former teachers. They have absolutely no expertise in construction. No expertise, for example, in buying building materials. They may have learned something along the way. You need to get specialists if you want to have an asset management unit. AMU actually in Ministry of Education looks after the fixing up and repairs and maintenance of schools when they make submissions. Then you have the curriculum division. The division sets the syllabus.
There's a lot of questions about that.
Exactly. Now, most of the people who actually are there are former teachers. If you go to other countries, the people who run the curriculum division, the syllabus division, are curriculum and syllabus experts. You don't become an expert just because you're a teacher. You need certain qualifications. So that is another reform that's part of it. So there are many aspects to the reform. The other one, of course, is the ability to apply for positions, on an open merit recruitment basis. That's one thing. You sit for various job tests, etc. Then there's the other issue about internal policies, about transfer, about, when can a person get a transfer? Do you have one husband posted, both of them are, say, teachers, husband and wife? One is posted in Ba, the other is posted in Lambasa. What is the policy regarding that? Is there some form of an open policy regarding that everybody knows what the rules are? These are some of the things that we've been changing quite significantly. Ministry of Education is the largest ministry, actually, I'm just sort of stopped holding it just before until the elections, and obviously they'll have a full-time minister dedicated to that. Over 10,000 teachers. You have over $500 million, $530 million from memory to the ministry itself. So, you see, there are many aspects to the reform. And what we are trying to do is be able to address all of those issues. Some have actually come to the fore a lot quicker than others. And you are right. The reality is that the ministry at one point in time resisted that. Because by having these new structures in place, you become a lot more transparent. You're no longer opaque. One other aspect that I really want to mention really quickly, student councillors. Huge lack of student councillors, especially student councillors. We have a lot of youths now, they have on social media, there a lot of peer pressure, a lot of bullying, etc. And a lot of it comes from social media. At the same time, somebody feels pressurized. You can go on social media and find out how you can commit suicide. Issues with drugs, teenage pregnancies. So there has never been, for the past number of decades, any focus on developing and incentivizing people to become career student counsellors. A lot of teachers, unfortunately, and I'm really thankful for these teachers, they actually double up as counsellors. They may not necessarily have the qualification, but they do so because they have passion to look after their children. So these are some of the aspects that we're looking at. Maybe having a counsellor dedicated to about 10 schools, in a particular area. So they move around every day. Maybe do, half a day in each school. In that way, we get all the students having access to counsellors. These are the very fundamental issues, not being addressed by many of the political parties.
FijiFirst General Secretary Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum on Straight Talk. We'll come back after this break.
Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. This week on Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Monday night at 7 p.m. NFP Party Leader Professor Biman Prasad. Tuesday at 12:30 p.m. FijiFirst General Secretary Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum. Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Unity Fiji Party Leader Saranatha Narumbe. And on Thursday, a double header with Biman Prasad and Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum. Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan. Watch the live stream on FijiVillage.com Facebook page or listen in live on VTFM 92, 92.2 or 92.6 FM. This is Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan.
Welcome back on Straight Talk. Our guest for today is the FijiFirst General Secretary, Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, talking a bit more about education, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, on curriculum. A lot of talk is going on about some of the books being used by our children, the students, is still from the 1970s. A lot of history is missing from our books. People do not know what has happened after 1970 because it ends there. And it is quite evident too during these elections when we talk about some of the things after 1970, the young population is really unaware of it, on what is going on. I know a lot of work is being put into saying that a review is underway, but when will we see new books, new curriculum for Fiji?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I think, in order to develop a sense of nationhood and civic pride, we need to be able to be comfortable to deal with our history. As uncomfortable as it may be for some people, but I think in order to mature and have that level of capacity and depth as a country, you need to be comfortable about our history. This is why, for example, I'm digressing slightly, is, our leader allows us to talk about our history openly, and if you hear what we say in Parliament, we talk about the 87 coup and the 2000, all the events related to it, quite openly. Biman Prasad and them don't. Sodelpa don't. A very skewed perspective. They remain very quiet about it, very mute about it.
They're saying don't go there.
So exactly. So my point is that you have to. I mean, even in countries like, for example, USA.
Why do you have to?
Even in countries like USA, you can only sort of negotiate your future if you're able to deal with the past. For example, the whole issue about slavery, recognizing slavery in USA is a fundamental issue. Same with Australia. The treatment of the Aboriginals in Australia was horrendous. They used to go shooting Aborigines after church in Tasmania. They kill every single Tasmanian Aborigine. So, I mean, these are the things we have to deal with and we have to be able to discuss. And you're absolutely right, we need to do that. It needs to be included in our curriculum in an objective manner, not in a sort of finger-pointing manner, but
right.
Basically stating the facts. But the other point that I'm also quite keen about, as we've said publicly, things like maths. We have this only one maths subject, and it's compulsory. But not everybody wants to do algebra and algorithms, etc. We need to have two strands of maths. What do you call life maths? Everybody's the sort of fundamentals from primary school. Then you have, then you sort of get into different strands. Somebody may be doing sort of art subjects. They need some maths, but they don't need to do the full-on, maths that you'll need if you're studying maths, in the long term. So we're going to introduce all of that. We've reached out to the Australians, for example, and in the respect they do have that. But there are a lot of mistakes too in a lot of the curriculum, in some of the books.
Mm-hmm.
One of the books I saw is that, if you look at it, it said, turn to the right, and they have the person turning to the left, and turn to the left and looking to the right. So even those kind of pictorials are in fact incorrect in some of them. So we're putting together, we have a good PS who's actually looking at it holistically, and we've had some discussions as to how we can put in place a team to be able to look at this, and we do need some outside expertise.
When do we expect the change to occur?
Well, we're already doing some of the groundwork in terms of some of the sort of design and the plan. We're also looking at, for example, like I mentioned to you earlier on, I think we've in this year's budget we've made an allocation for a team to go out and do a stock take of all the schools in Fiji, because it's never been done. Bulk of all the schools in Fiji are non-government schools. They're either faith-based schools or they're run by what you call school management committees, community-based schools. So they have the varying levels of infrastructure. So we need to identify which ones we need to give priority. We need to get science labs, in a concerted manner, science labs, computer labs, etc., for all the schools. And we are very much focused on primary and secondary education. Just the fundamentals. I was just talking to a teacher 3 weeks ago. He has 3 people in his class in what we call Form 3 or Year 9 who can't read 2 sentences. They pass through the whole system, but they aren't able to do that. So there's obviously something fundamentally wrong with the approach in not just teaching but the curriculum. And they need to be given some level of assistance. So how are we going to structure the system? That's precisely what we focus on. If you listen to the other opposition parties, if I can bring it to them, they're only talking about universities. Why? Because university students vote. Primary and secondary school students don't vote. But we have a huge focus in that area. Also early childhood education.
The other issue is about teacher contracts. When we talk about education, the unions are saying you have reduced the contracts, even for civil servants, 3-year contracts, 4-year contracts.
5-year contracts.
Biman Prasad has been saying there's 6-year, 1-year, 6-month and 1-year contracts. Can you confirm whether this is true? Even the contracts run for 6 months, 1 year?
No, you see, again, he's not being honest about it. Intellectual dishonesty is there. There are people who have 6-month contracts because they may be coming to a end of a particular, project. There are people who are on projects. Some people in what we used to be called PWD and Ministry of Infrastructure now, a lot of them had for like 20, 30 years had 6 months contract, 1-year contracts. They didn't mention anything about it then. The reality is that teachers now with the right qualifications, they get substantive position, they get 5-year contracts. There are early childhood education teachers who don't have the right qualifications. So we give them 1 year to essentially get the qualification, then we give them the long-term 5-year contracts. That's to incentivize them to get the qualifications. Because there's no point hiring somebody who doesn't have the skill sets to be able to teach your child. So that's where some instances we've had that. But everybody that's been on a substantive appointment, they get 5-year contracts. Some ministries in other ministries are giving 3-year contracts, but the maximum you get is 5-year contracts. Now, there are people who work in this organization, your organization. Nobody has a job for life. People have 3-year contracts. Some may have 5-year contracts. Generally in the private sector, you get a 3-year contract. It does not mean you cannot get loans. And it's completely false for the unions to actually say that they weren't consulted. They were consulted right from the beginning. They also don't tell you that prior to this new reforms being implemented, already 70% of the people are already on contracts. They don't tell you that too. So, you see, fundamentally it does not in any way derogate or negate their ability to perform their duties, does not in any way financially deprive them. But Biman also does not tell you that many of these people have got substantial pay rises. He forgets to mention that. He's forgot to mention the fact that all these people have now access to be able to get qualifications that we will pay for. There is now also, we have performance management systems. People are able to now get individually assessed, and the next round will be coming out in January. We've said it's being allocated in this year's budget. So people get individually assessed, a kind of bonus system. It's never been there. I heard him say on a radio show, they've had it there for a long time. No, it's utter nonsense. The other point I also want to say, he's saying, ministers appoint people. He forgets to mention that permanent secretaries aren't appointed by the Prime Minister. You have the concurrence of the Prime Minister, but the entire interview process, the entire selection process, the entire setting of salaries is done by the Public Service Commission. And it is part of their contract to ensure that they deliver service to the public through the ministries that they are responsible for. And they are also financially responsible for those ministries. He forgot to completely mention that. He also forgot to completely mention the fact that when people, for example, get now disciplined for some reason or the other, they have to go through a particular process. They have to go to the Public Service Disciplinary Tribunal. It's an independent tribunal headed by a judge or a magistrate. You then also have, for example, if you apply for a job, if you don't get it, if you believe that there are some procedural errors, you actually can then apply to the Public Service Commission that has a review panel. It's headed by Glenn, I forget his surname, he's an Australian, who independently assesses it. If he finds that the appeal should be upheld, you have to go through the entire process again. See, none of this he actually mentions in public.
No, political opponents too, National Federation Party, Fiji Labour Party, and Sodelpa, they're saying they'll bring back the permanent contracts, bring back Job for Life. We've been asking how will this work with the people not having a clear performance measurement system in place and things like that, but they say that's what people want, we'll give them the permanent contracts. What's your stand on that?
They want their vote. That's what they want. They've seen a vote bank. They say, we're going to, you do this, you vote for us in, we'll change this. But there's no details. You see, they're very scant on details. They've just seen them as a vote bank. What they're forgetting about is that these civil servants, public servants, are supposed to serve the public. If you take out about 27,000 civil servants, the balance of the population is 894,000 minus about, say, 30,000. They have to serve the 860,000 people. So these people, these political parties, in their quest to get the vote of the civil servants and their families, they've forgotten about the majority of the population.
Does FijiFirst feel that the civil servants are well informed about all the changes and will not be swayed by what other parties say?
I think a lot of civil servants have been given a lot of misinformation. And I think the political parties, including some trade unionists, are actively involved in spreading the misinformation, are actively involved in giving sweeteners, offering them sweeteners, which won't be possible to implement. So I think, again, that's a huge problem. And I simply wish, and we simply wish, that these political parties actually came up with something that was original, actually came up with ideas that they could be costed, came up with ideas that was actually good for the public of Fiji, all Fijian citizens. Overall good of the country is very critical. They're simply, going to certain areas, there's a big old bridge here, don't worry, voters in will fix up the bridge. They're going on very simple, parochial issues. I can tell you numerous stories about it.
FijiFirst General Secretary Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum on Straight Talk now. All other parties have been saying in campaign meetings that the FijiFirst is run by two men, you and the Prime Minister, while others who are part of the FijiFirst are seat warmers. What's your comment?
I can turn around and say, Sodelpa is run by basically Rambuka and Lalambalavu. Or I can turn around and say, NFP is run by Bhiman Prasad and Pio Tikundundua. I mean, I can say that. He's the leader. Bhiman should lead the leader. So what's wrong with Bhiman leading his party? What's wrong with Bhiman leading his party? He's the leader, so he should lead. Savinatha Narumbe is the leader of his party. He should lead the party. Ratimara led the Alliance Party with an iron fist. Does anybody complain about that? We have Benny Marama, who actually leads FijiFirst, and actually he's a fantastic leader. He's a leader that has the ability to think about everybody. He's very compassionate. He makes decisive steps, but more importantly, actually, he has the gumption to be able to go against the grain if he knows it's good for the country.
Why do they include you in the mix?
Well, again, perhaps because I've been there since 2007. Perhaps that's why.
Now,
you need to ask them.
Now, NFP says it will cut salaries and allowances of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers by 25%. It's in their broad policy, which they said they will be announcing. What is the FijiFirst stand on this? Because this is also a campaign issue which your political opponents have been taken out.
Yeah, I think, again, it's a distraction, it's a sideshow. We have not had people talk to us about that. They're trying to hone into that. Assuming that they get into government, God forbid, and there is a 25% reduction, how is that suddenly going to fix up the economy? What difference will it make to the ordinary people's lives? We had one of them, I think Lenora, somebody said she's going to catch the bus to work. What a preposterous idea. What about efficiencies? What about going to meetings on time? I mean, you see, this is the kind of gimmickry that we have people going about and telling people. The people need to not be swayed by that. The people need to think about the overall policy, the leadership that's guaranteed stability, security and equality by Benny Marama, the leadership that has got the gumption to be able to stand domestically and also internationally. We have our economic indicators, not just verified by us, not just by the Reserve Bank of Fiji, but also internationally. I love the way that, Bhiman sort of rolled out this ease of doing business relying on World Bank. And when we tell them that the World Bank is telling us we're doing economically, we don't believe the World Bank. See, these are the kind of double standards and hypocrisy that we find. So look, I think, this is the problem that we have. It's all gimmick.
Now, you said Facebook can be a very important tool. On Facebook, there's a lot that's being said, and also some of the information where screenshots, where people have put up screenshots and typed out things to show that ministers are earning this much. Total amounts been given like $3 million, $4 million, and calculating each portfolio that a minister is holding and adding them up. Of course, the budgets say otherwise. If you can clear the air about salaries as well on Straight Talk.
Vijay, my salary, for example, and the Prime Minister's salary has been made public every year because we are officials of the party. So every year we have to state how much money we earn, what are the assets we have, and you will see. I mean, you can go now to the elections office, or anybody can now go to the supervisor of elections office, who's also the registrar of political parties, and pull that document out. We most certainly don't make false declarations, but you can see how much money we earn. See, again, this is all gimmickry. I mean, somebody was saying that the PM has got money stashed away overseas. I've got money stashed away in USA. Oh, it's so ridiculous. You had some people on social media having a photo of some newspaper saying, Kandawu is being sold to China. This is the level of desperation that you have the political parties. But what is really bothering in all of this? Biman Prasad, no Rambuka to an extent, we don't probably expect Rambuka to do that. Here is Biman Prasad parading himself as an economist and somebody who has a bit of knowledge, does not come out emphatically and say, look guys, Kandawu cannot be sold to China. Look guys, we cannot have the highest level of debt in the world. This is the level of debt that's publicly made available. It's a little over $5 billion. Look guys, the debt actually is inherited. $2.8 billion was inherited from the previous government. He does not say that. He actually lets these lies be perpetuated in the same way his impotency has been in respect of racial and religious vilification by his own party members. Remember the time of the issues about Pramod Chand? It was in the Fiji Sun. I think their lawyers came out and said, we'll do an investigation. We'll find out. We'll do our investigation. We'll find out. Where's the investigation? You see, this is the impotency and this is the level of hypocrisy being demonstrated by Biman and his party.
FijiFirst General Secretary Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, we have a question from Naomi from Levuka. Good afternoon.
If Mr. Sayed could explain to us why some of the parliamentarians and supporters of the FijiFirst party left the party, such as Tikondundua.
Okay, you really have to ask Pio Tikondundua why did he leave, but I can tell you what we know. He told the Honourable Prime Minister that he was ill, that he had an illness, as you can see on the right side, which is unfortunate. Pio actually and I were very, very close. In fact, we were friends, I would say that. He was the only permanent secretary at that point in time who actually attended my wedding, the private wedding that we had in the ceremony at my brother's house.
He was the permanent secretary for justice then? He
was permanent secretary for justice and became the permanent secretary in the PM's office. And I've never said anything malicious about him publicly, nor privately for that matter. But he did say and convinced us and convinced me most certainly that he was actually ill and that his family wanted him to leave public life. And I still remember that. I still remember going to his house that particular night. And I remember saying to Ella, my wife, we must go and visit him, etc. And then we found out that there are obviously other motivations. But that's why, that was the reason that Pio gave us. He's obviously had a change of heart, whatever the case may be.
A question from Abdul from Lautoka. Good afternoon, Abdul.
The Minister, would you be able to reduce the VAT by 1% in your next budget? Thank you.
That's something that we have not considered at this point in time. But you see, again, you have to look at the impact of it overall. And we need to look at the income impact on the VAT reduction. But like I said, let's not get obsessed by VAT in itself. You see, you're letting the paradigm or the discourse being taken over by thinking that VAT reduction is the only way to meet your day-to-day living costs. It's not the only way. In fact, there are other means through which you reduce your income, your living costs, and that is by way of government assistance, which is targeted assistance. One thing people need to understand: when you, for example, have VAT exemption, guess what? If you don't pay VAT on, for example, rice, and supposedly is to help the poor people, guess who's also benefiting? The rich people also. The guy who's earning $500,000 a year, he also does not pay VAT. The person who's earning $7,000 a year, $15,000 a year, also does not pay VAT. We'd rather have uniformity, have a lower level of VAT, and then be able to have what we call targeted assistance. So we give, for example, $1,000 to young babies that are born actually with parents who earn less than $30,000 a year to defray the costs. This is what you call targeted assistance, and that's what we really should be focused upon. We have come up with very creative things, like we've insured everybody that is on pension, on social welfare. We've insured civil servants. People don't talk about that too. So a person, for example, who's receiving social welfare, assuming their house burns down now, who will they go running to? They'll come to government. But government has protected itself by taking out insurance cover, so immediately we can give them $3,000 to help them, recover.
FijiFirst General Secretary Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum will talk about minimum wage rate. Now, I've just got a statement from Textile, Clothing and Footwear Council of Fiji. We'll talk about that. That's just been released in the last half hour, Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum. Textile, Clothing and Footwear Industry Council of Fiji is both alarmed and concerned of recent media comments from various political parties calling for the national minimum wage rate to be dramatically and suddenly increased from $4 to $5 per hour and even up to $10 per hour. Now, the industry says they directly employ 7,000 Fijians, and the indirect impact is even higher when extended to other employees' households. Approximately 20,000 Fijian men and women, children depend on the industry for their daily needs. Further still, the economic empowerment of the industry skews heavily female. 80% of industry employees are women. Now, the Textile Council is fully committed to taking part in thoughtful and responsible reforms. Now, they're saying they're expected to be job losses with the sudden wage increases. They've said that will greatly affect their industry. You, as the General Secretary of FijiFirst, what do you have to say with such a big sector now saying that there could be a big loss of jobs as far as textile, footwear and clothing council is concerned?
See, Vijay, this is what we've been saying precisely right from day one. Number one, our leader was the first one who introduced actual minimum wage in Fiji. Right? We started in 2014 at $2. Minimum wage now, and let me reiterate this, a lot of people get carried away with this. Minimum wage is for unskilled work. People who don't have any form of qualification, any form of certificate. So somebody comes to your house and says, I want to cut the grass. So if you say minimum wage $5, you have to pay them $5 an hour. They work in your yard for 6 hours, 6 multiplied by 5, that's how much you pay them. You pay them $30. For what we call, unfortunately, house girls or housemaids, that's unskilled work. Or somebody has to come and dig a drain in your place because your drain is blocked, you pay them $5. That's unskilled work. Now, what we have continuously said, that with the introduction of minimum wage $2 an hour, we need to constantly review it. We did another review, it went up to $2.32. Then it went up to $2.68. The minimum wage, and I've got here, for all other employment sectors,
The 10 wages councils,
they're different. Some of them minimum wage is $4 at the moment, some of them are $5, some of them are $6, some are $3.50, etc. Now, what we have said and is announced in the budget, we need to do a thorough review, not just of minimum wage for unskilled work, but for everybody else, these people too. And we need to put in place a mechanism, a system, where we can get regular assessments, look at the economy, look at the impact on losses, job increments, look at the amount of social wages government is giving out. That's very important, because that's factored into your cost of living. Look at, for example, reduction in VAT, etc. If you are going to, and it's very irresponsible, and I keep on saying this, if you are going to suddenly jack up prices, and in particular this industry, where majority of the production they have is actually sent overseas. It's not so locally. They send overseas. These people have to compete with other suppliers of garments. Now, I've been to overseas countries where people make clothes at a massive scale. We have, over the past number of years, we've been actually giving money to the TCF. The past, since 2009, I think. We've been giving them $300,000 in marketing grant, trying to restructure our garment industry. As you know, at one point in time, we had something like over 21,000 garment workers in Fiji when we had what we call market access to USA. Because now Fiji is deemed to be a middle income country, we no longer have that market access. Countries like Bangladesh does. They have market access because they're deemed to be a least LDC, least developed country. So we have to compete with those people. So now we are targeting the garment industry, so we make what we call smaller batches, So some fashion house in Sydney wants 300 tops. And we can make that. It goes on plane, goes into the shop. They don't have to warehouse it. The pricing needs to be reasonable. But the fact of the matter, if you're suddenly going to jack it up, they'll say, hey, this is too expensive. Let's go to Bangladesh. So what we're saying, we need to increase pay. But let's put it into perspective. Let's gradually do it. Now, Biman Prasad has also admitted in Fiji Sun, through that email that came out, said to some businesswoman, we'll gradually do it. On your show, he said, we'll have a package. We'll do it in 100 days. They're not coming out clearly to say that. Linda Tambuya, the lecture at USP, said at $4 an hour, we'll give subsidy to smaller businesses. You see, that is what we call a huge level of instability that will be created in the market. What we are saying, we've increased it from $2 to $2.68. We need to make sure, if, for example, for minimum wage, a person who's unskilled goes up to $5, what do you think a person who's gone to a technical college and has spent 2 years and 18 months and is currently getting $6 an hour, say wages, what do you think he or she will say? This person is unskilled getting $5. I should go up to $12. So that'll be the impact on the economy.
You talked about the review of these rates and also the 10 wages councils. When are you expected to do that?
We already announced in the budget. We hope to start that next year. And we need to do it in a very professional manner. Get everybody's views on it. Do the economic indicators. Use the economic indicators. Factor that in. And then we can come up with a good plan that will be satisfactory to everybody.
Now, just in relation to government debt, a lot has been said about government debt. The last budget, the government debt stood at about $5.1 billion. Some political parties have sat here and said, no, it's $8 billion, but the statistics are clear there. And I think the service debt to GDP ratio is around 45% or 44%, around that. Now, with that debt servicing and everything that you have worked out as far as debt repayments are concerned, you are the Minister for Economy on what is being done. Do you believe that what is being said, if there's any information that is being twisted several ways to try to say things like Fiji will be sold to China, or Chinese will be taking over assets of these companies and government assets of these areas. What do you have to say to that? Because these are all being said all over the place. Even the Australian media had reported it through Rambuka's interview, and we spoke to Rambuka last week, where he said he now realizes they were all private investments and government did not borrow money to, for example, do that big building in McGregor Road. What's your comment on that, knowing that it's been going around in the campaign meetings, it's on Facebook, that a lot of loan has been taken from China and Fiji is selling itself to China?
See, what is really, in all of this, what is really disappointing, I mean, we don't expect Rambuka to be, some kind of Einstein regarding the economy. I mean, under him, we lost the National Bank of Fiji. Under him, we had a lot of economic catastrophes. Corruption also became rampant. What is really disappointing is that Biman Prasad, who is an economist, should have a particular level of integrity and bring a new breath of fresh air into the economic debate. But he has failed miserably because, like you quite correctly pointed out, he has failed to say, look guys, this is the facts. Everybody knows that our debt is a little over $5 billion. Everybody knows. You just need to go to the RBF, look at the statistics, the budget books. The Prime Minister Benny Marama in 2007 inherited a debt of $2.8 billion. Everybody knows that you have to pay the debt of the previous governments. Everybody knows that today we are actually spending, or we are borrowing less for infrastructure costs because we have an overall operating surplus. The statistics are available. So then try and twist and turn things. They say, the average growth since 2007 has only been 2%. They don't tell you that there was a world downturn, the GCF. that we had in 2008, 2009. All the economies in the world went down then. Despite that, we have now had 9 years of straight growth. Never happened before. These statistics are undeniable. Everybody knows that as a percentage of our debt to GDP ratio has been decreasing. It's actually 47%. Everybody knows that. Used to be at one stage 56%, 53%. Debt to GDP ratio has decreased. Everybody knows that we have spent $7 billion since 2007 till now in capital infrastructure, when they spent $3.5 billion in the 20 years preceding that, 20 to 22 years preceding that. These are statistically available figures. It's available. So you see, the ability to not say things when people are saying things like, China is taking over Kandavu, the ability not to acknowledge that these are the statistics that are available, actually means that Bhiman Prasad and the other political parties are just so desperate to win government at any cost. What we have said in Parliament previously, the Honourable Prime Minister said it, we have said it on the side of government too, overall, the ministers have said it. Let's not compromise our economic situation for short-term political gain. Bhiman is known on record in Parliament to say, everything is okay in politics. We don't believe that. Our Prime Ministers come out and say, don't lie. Let's contest the election without lies.
Do you believe that information that is being taken out by these people, do you believe that it will hurt FijiFirst badly? Or do you believe that people are realizing that majority of the people know, okay, we believe what FijiFirst is saying, we believe the statistics?
In 2000, when Mahendra Chaudhary became Prime Minister, they said that he had sold Fiji to India. When we were at Syria Park in Nosori at our first family fun day, after the formalities were over, we was on the stage and this lady came to me, I think she was from Naitasiri, and she said to me, AG, please tell me, is China taking over Kandavu? And I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. But she was serious, and I explained it to her, and she goes, Sandina. I said, yes. And I told her how it is legally not possible to sell part of your country to another country, and how much debt we have with the Exim Bank of China. It's only 10% of the value of our GDP. It's about a little over $500 million. And I stated to her exactly the 7 projects for which we borrowed the money for. And the last time we borrowed from China was in 2012. So, you see, there are people who may believe. There are people who say, oh, no, China is being taken over Kandavu. It is not. So we find a lot of our candidates, in fact, I was just talking to some of the candidates this morning, they've been to meetings, they say most of the questions that people ask them is about this. Some people are being told that we have a debt that's worth more than the USA. That's what they said last time. They said, our debt is more than USA. In USA's debt is 19.2 or 19.3 trillion US dollars. Our debt in US dollars is a little over 2.5 million or 2.4 million dollars. So US dollars, 2.4 billion US dollars. So you see, this is the kind of misinformation. But what really is quite disconcerting is people like Bhiman, they know this, but they don't say anything about it. They don't want to have a contest or debate on fair terms.
Do you believe that people out there are believing your statistics? Majority of the people.
Oh, do they believe our statistics?
Yes, majority of the people.
We hope so. We believe so. We spend most of our time trying to explain it to them. It's always very easy to go and lie to people. In the same way, like, Pauline Hanson was going around Australia saying the reason why we don't have jobs because we've got too many immigrants, they're taking our jobs. In the same way, people say, oh, there's too much debt, or this particular group is taking over the country. It's easy to believe. But if I sit down and explain to them economically how it works, it may sound a bit tedious. But that is the reality. So that's what we're spending most of our time doing, is trying to explain to people how the system works. The example that I do use with them in the political party meetings, and I say to them, this person earns $500,000, and his debt is $100,000. This person earns $30,000. His debt is $20,000. Who is better off? Even though this person's debt $20,000 is less than $100,000, then you put it into perspective, because his is 20% of his income. His is 66% of his income. So that's how we're trying to explain to people, and that's the position that we are in. Don't look at the nominal value. Don't look at the dollar value, but look at it as a percentage of your income or percentage of your GDP.
I want to ask you something from Tambi, a campaign meeting with the NFP, the candidate Charanjit Singh. He said in Hindustani in Tambia, that big Gujarati business people who have given a lot of money to Fiji First have put pressure on the current government not to increase the minimum wage rate, and he's also saying that they're giving $300,000 to $400,000. We asked him to provide evidence. He hasn't provided evidence, and also there's a screenshot with different people's names, and the amounts there are $10,000, which is within the Electoral Act requirements or Political Parties Act requirements that a person can donate $10,000 individually, even if there's a few members of the family. Can you clarify this? Because he's now saying that Fiji First is being influenced by business people not to increase the minimum wage rate to $5.
We are being influenced by economic imperatives. We actually care about the common people. We care about job losses. The TCF has just come out and issued a statement. That is precisely what we are concerned about. We don't want job losses. We want to have job increments. Last year we increased jobs by 20,000 new positions. The year before that, 20,000 new positions. We want to continue to do that. We want the retirement age to be kept at 55 because a lot of young people are coming through the education system in the civil service. They need to be given jobs. On one hand, these opposition people talk about, we care about the youth, but they want to increase the retirement age for civil servants to 60. What will happen to the youth? What are their opportunities of getting jobs? That's precisely the reason why we did do that. The second thing is, my only two things to Charan. If Charan is so hell-bent on $5 an hour, tell him to start paying his employees. Tell him to start paying his employees from tomorrow. I understand he issued a statement saying that, there has to be a legal, imperative, only then he start paying. No. There are people getting paid more than the legal minimum wage for some of these different skill sets. Some waiters and waitresses are getting more than $3.45 or $3.40 an hour in other hotels because there's a demand, they're very good. He should start doing that. If he philosophically believes in, he should start doing that. He gave a ridiculous response saying, I don't want to somehow the other discriminate against the business next to mine because they're paying less and I know they can't afford it.
We spoke to Biman Prasad as well. He said they will only start paying when the law comes into place.
Yeah. Well, you see, this is a gimmick. Why? If you philosophically believe in it and you believe that you can afford it, start doing it now. Number two, Charan actually gave $10,000. Let me make this all emphatically clear.
To Fiji First.
To Fiji First, before the last elections, but he expected to be made a candidate. He applied to be a candidate too.
So he gave $10,000 as a supporter?
In the hope to get a ticket. He was told emphatically that there should be no tie-in with the amount of money you donate and your ability to become a candidate for the party. He did not like it and we actually returned his check. That's how principled a position we took. That if you think you're going to donate, just because you get a candidate's position, we'll return a check. And the check was donated.
So just because he's rejected, he's now saying that you are getting $300,000-$400,000 from other people?
You see, I mean, again, this is a person's credibility zone. I mean, you can judge from that. I mean, he's making all sorts of allegations against Sanjay Kaba, saying that, he was forcing me to give $40,000, $50,000. Obviously, he can't force. Nobody can force anybody. Obviously, we say to people, if you can give, what about your family members? Can they give or not? Can his sons, daughters, wives
the
give
law
money?
Says a person can give.
A person can
up
give.
To $10,000.
You can give $10,000. Your son can give $10,000 up to. No more than that. But as an individual. So you see, these guys, these are sideshows. These people are a bit of a joke. They're trying to gain some level of currency, some level of influence. So the voters need to look at the substance. They need to look at the substance of their policies. They need to look at how genuine they are about this. And you see, Biman was ducking and weaving last night. I heard him. We'll do a package. We can't pay $5 an hour to cane cutters. It's going to be called the national minimum wage. National minimum wage means national minimum wage.
Not
you see, because he knows the reason why he was saying about cane cutters, because he knows the farmers can't afford to do that and they don't want to do that. We've spoken to the farmers. They all laugh if they tell them you're going to give them $5 because the farmers also give them grog, they give them accommodation, they give them food. So you see, these people aren't genuine.
As we wrap up the show, Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, you've said that you've been with Mr. Bainimarama from 2007 onwards. He's also said that you are his right-hand man. You have worked with him throughout. Now he will continue to lead Fiji First. Progression plan for Fiji First. Will you be the next leader after Mr. Bainimarama?
Look, I think these things are all sideshow questions, frankly. What we need to be focused on is the 2018 elections. We have a lot of work to be done. We have a fantastic leader. I mean, I am very privileged to be able to work for a leader such as Josiah Vorengi Beni Marama. In fact, I consider it a blessing, because never in my own lifetime I thought that we would be able to live in a Fiji that we are currently living in, a Fiji with that type of constitution that we have. So he's a fantastic leader, and I think history will judge him fantastically, and books will be written about him too. But the fact of the matter is, we are focused on the 2018 elections, and the people of Fiji need to understand that this election is perhaps, from one perspective, even more important than the last one, because many of these opposition people are at the last days of their political careers. They'll become even more, more desperate. Their claims, all things they'll offer you will become very fanciful. They'll offer you the sun and the moon. They'll make all sorts of allegations. Don't fall for that. Look at the facts. Look at the proven track record of Josiah Vorengi Beni Marama and vote 688.
That's Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum, the General Secretary for FijiFirst. Thank you very much for coming. And now this is just to explain the format for listeners and viewers out there. As the parties come, they have their say. They have their say on what they plan to do. We asked them for FijiFirst. They haven't come out with their manifesto, and we will definitely wait for the manifesto and then talk about that further. Today was about what Fiji has achieved so far from 2007 onwards, and how things have gone. Of course, on Thursday night, we'll talk policy, and we'll talk about a lot of issues about what is being said by the FijiFirst and what is being said by NFP. And it will be a debate between Mr. Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum and Professor Biman Prasad. So that's happening on Thursday night at 7 p.m. Both gentlemen have confirmed. Thank you very much for that. A lot of people are looking forward to that debate, and that will also be shown live on Facebook. Mr. Sayed-Khaiyum, again, thank you very much for taking out time from a busy schedule today to make it, because we know that you've got the royal couple visit later today, and we almost could not have the show if we went ahead this evening.
Thank you, Naga. Thanks for having me.
The 2018 general elections. The issues that matter. The people that matter. This is Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan.